The Baillieu government's promised tough approach to criminal justice came under scrutiny this week after crime statistics showed violence in the home is a much bigger threat than on our streets. Yet domestic violence has scarcely rated a mention from the coalition. Its priority has been harsher sentencing and more police. But whatever the government's doing in its first year, it must be working, with a poll showing strong support for the coalition's agenda. Cheryl Hall takes a look at a busy week in Victoria's Parliament.
It was a week where the government's critics came out in force. On Monday, the government fulfilled its election promise to implement the toughest restrictions on wind farms anywhere in Australia.
What it does do is say where the government believes wind farms can go and where they can't.
Those restrictions have prompted at least 2 wind farm companies to declare they'd be looking for new projects in other states.
I was in Sydney yesterday talking to a New South Wales government representative, and they said, well, this is great for New South Wales, isn't it? And yes, I guess it is.
And then a blow for solar power that has put on hold 200 new jobs in regional Victoria. The Energy Minister announced payments for people feeding solar energy back into the electricity grid will be slashed by more than half.
We are not prepared to see the electricity bills of pensioners and others who can't afford rooftop solar jacked up because of Labor's costly PFIT blowouts.
This week, the government's laws to put armed guards on every train station passed through Parliament, but the coalition's promised hardline approach to crime and violence may not be helping the most vulnerable.
If they don't get behind this program, every death after that is going to be on their hands.
In the last few days, federal funding ended for a highly successful personal alarm system for those trying to escape domestic violence. A clearly concerned Acting Chief Police Commissioner, Ken Lay, said domestic violence is increasing and needs to be tackled.
When people think about not being safe, they think about being at a railway station or a street where they might get assaulted. But our data is very, very clear that there's far greater risk of being assaulted if you're in a family environment.
Labor blames the coalition and says there's not nearly enough specialised funding to address the problem.
Family violence has been treated by this government as the poor cousin of community safety, yet the greatest risk for most women and children is not what happens when they walk down King Street, but what happens when they close their door at night.
I sense there does need to be quite a shift in people's attitudes, the community's attitudes about violence in the home.
And while the coalition is promising to build new prisons to accommodate its harder approach to sentencing, the Victorian Ombudsman delivered bad news about the jails we already have. 1/3 of prisoners have the serious disease hepatitis C, which can spread easily in the community after they're released.
If you want to stop the spread of hepatitis C in our prison system, the safest and simplest way to do it is to implement a needle and syringe exchange within the prison system.
And 1/3 of prisoners also have mental health problems. Help for those problems the Ombudsman described as grossly inadequate.
With the Liberal policies, which are more punitive, harsher, longer sentences, less judicial discretion, this is going to increase the number of prisoners. So what we're really seeing is a crisis in prison population and inadequate funding towards that. What we want to see is funding that would be used to build new prisons actually redirected to prevent crime from happening in the first place.
But the government's tough on crime line was supported this week by a survey from the Sentencing Advisory Council that found almost 2/3 of Victorians think judges are out of touch. It sparked a rare public comment from Victoria's most senior judge, Chief Justice Marilyn Warren.
And a judge cannot just deal with the views of the victim. A judge has to deal with the whole range of things that are before the court. So it's the victim, it's the accused, it's consistency in sentencing.
Do you still lose sleep over sentencing?
I do.
Most judges do, don't they?
They do.
Yet despite some vocal criticism, as the coalition's reform agenda gets underway, it seems most Victorians like what the government's doing. A poll in the Australian newspaper reveals strong support for the Baillieu government after 10 months in office. If an election were held now, Labor would lose another 20 seats in Parliament.